Hello, I wanted to just welcome everybody to this discussion today about building coalitions on AI policy. We have an incredible panel of extraordinary experts with us today, and we're going to try to cover a lot of ground in not so much time. So our goal for today is that we want to walk away from this discussion with some actionable insights that you can actually put to use for your own advocacy efforts around AI, whether at the local, the state, the federal level. We want stuff you can actually do. So here to share their experiences, we have some people with some amazing know-how. I'm going to start with, right next to me, Tom Cleese, who is a lobbyist and political strategist for RIAA, advocating for major record labels on issues like copyright, AI, COVID-19 relief, and social justice reforms. He previously served as an advisor to Senator Jack Reed and Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema and worked as a political law attorney in Arizona. Next up, I have my good friend and colleague, Kerry Wood-Einerstein, who is the Executive Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy at SAG-AFTRA. Kerry focuses on the state and federal issues like copyright, production tax incentives, and has played an absolutely integral role in the union's AI policy efforts. In 2022, she was appointed to the California Film Commission. Kerry is a USC graduate and Los Angeles native who previously worked for Congressman Brad Sherman as an executive and recruiter at Korn Ferry International. Next up, hello there, I have Nicole Gunnisman, who is a senior vice president and counsel at the National Association of Broadcasters, where she has been advocating on behalf of broadcasters to federal officials since 2017. She previously spent 11 years on Capitol. Yeah, they wanted to clap for you early. That was very exciting. I'll clap for you all. 11 years on Capitol Hill advising the judiciary, Homeland Security, and education issues, and held key roles with leaders like Steve Scalise and Eric Cantor. And finally, Jenny Katzman is a lawyer and policy expert who serves as a senior director at Microsoft, where she leads the U.S. government affairs policy efforts on intellectual property and digital safety, as well as on issues related to reducing the risks proposed by synthetic content, which we're going to talk more about today. She previously served as General Counsel and Chief Domestic Policy Officer for Senator Ron Wyden, as well as in the Obama administration at the Department of Justice, White House, Domestic Policy Council, and the Department of Education. Unfortunately, SAG-AFTRA Secretary-Treasurer Jolie Fisher, who was slated to join this panel, is not able to be here, but sends her regrets. So now I'm going to let you applaud for all these fabulous folks here. We'll give them a big round of applause. We're going to kick it off, but that's right. I want to start with you, Kerry, and it's not just because you're playing for the home team. Why do you need a coalition? Can you talk a little bit about SAG-AFTRA's experience building a coalition, like with the No Fakes Act and other things?
How's that? Okay. Hi, everybody. So I think everything we've done in my role, everything we've done at SAG-AFTRA has involved a coalition, whether it's in California, in D.C. It's just the way that you get things done and the way bills get passed. And so I want to just mention, one of our top priorities right now is the No Fakes Act. And we have an extraordinary coalition, including Tom and Nicole here with me, that we've built out. And we don't have any opposition at this point. And it's just been the most important thing for us to have people like the broadcasters, like the Recording Association. So, and it's impactful when you're talking to legislators. There's strength in numbers. And so it's been sort of very critical to our work.
Very good. So, Tom, how is your approach to AI policy different from other types of policy objectives? It would be great to hear a little bit about that.
Well, when it comes to AI, I think that we're all in a very privileged position right now as policy advocates because we get to be the first people to lobby on this. We get to be the first people to hear the stories of those who are affected by it, to really get into the weeds with the communities that we represent, and to talk to policymakers who may or may not have engaged with AI yet in their everyday lives. So it's not very often that something that touches this many lives comes along as an issue of first impression, and I think that we're incredibly privileged to be able to have have that conversation before there are battle lines drawn, before there's a reflexive conservative or liberal or progressive position on it. Like, we can actually cut across lines and maybe, unlike other areas of public policy like privacy or some things that have remained stalled for up to a decade or more, maybe we could set the precedent here by working together and getting things done one step at a time.
I love that answer. Yeah, before the battle lines are drawn. That's fantastic. Nicole, I'm coming to you. AI is such a huge and far-reaching public topic. Like, how do you narrow the focus, and how do you stay on track with the work you do legislatively?
Yeah, as Tom just mentioned, because this is such a new issue to everyone, including Congress, luckily Congress is being very thoughtful about their approach to this. There are a lot of issues where something will happen and Congress just kind of jumps in with both feet before really thinking the issues through. In this, they're really, they're being considerate about the issues that are involved, but also listening to people in the fields that are impacted by this. And so I think for those of us who are part of this Coalition for No Fakes, for example, we looked at what are the things that we know could be the downsides here, right? Something that for all of us is very important is the ability for the public to trust that the people that they're seeing who work in our industries are those people, right? And so for us, on this, we also had willing partners in Congress who were able to introduce legislation here and really kind of take what they were learning in the real world and put that into legislation. And so I think that you'll see a lot more on this issue in times to come. But it's something where we've got congressional leaders who are willing to engage and coalition partners that we can work with on it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Jenny, now, last but certainly not least, as a provider of AI technology products, how does Microsoft view AI policy? Does it differ greatly from what you're hearing from your fellow panelists, or is it similar?
Yeah, so I mean, we see it from three different lenses. So we're rights holder, first of all. We're also a platform, and yeah, we are a developer. So we see it from three different viewpoints, and sometimes those viewpoints align, and sometimes they don't, and that can be tricky. So I think there's actually a lot of commonality. When it comes to no fakes, we have said very publicly, we wrote in response to the Copyright Office's notice of inquiry that we would support a federal right to address unauthorized uses of digital replicas. We think that's a really important issue. When it comes to AI, we see a lot of opportunity with AI. We're an AI developer, but we also know that as you have more sophisticated technology, there's going to be harms associated with it, and the use of unauthorized digital replicas is an example of one of those harms. So I think there is that commonality, but there are going to be differences, and I think because we're an AI developer, we have a different perspective from that, and so there are different things that we're going to be looking at when we're looking at bills that that our panelists are not going to be looking at.
Gotcha. We'll do a deeper dive on that a little bit. Carrie, so what is the secret to labor management cooperation on AI policy? I mean, why has the work that we've done in the entertainment and media space worked so well, and what lessons might be applied to other industries, do you think?
Sure. So I'll take it back to, I think, the coalition building question as well. So there's an example. I remember when President Carteris was president, we had a bill in California dealing with IMDb and ages and removing the ages, and we were able to get that done. And it was really interesting because we found some partnerships in unlikely places, like with the AARP, for example. Those are folks that we hadn't worked with previously. And I think it's just about reaching across, maybe getting outside of your comfort zone, reaching out to people who share your same viewpoints, maybe in a different angle. And that's sort of how we've been getting, we've built this coalition, and we've been getting a lot of bills. We just got 2 signed in California that Lorena mentioned in there. And again, when we talk about no fakes, just so everybody knows, this is about image and likeness and voice, and this is about your rights to it and consent to it. And that's sort of our top priority now. And politicians are also invested in that, and that helps because it's going to affect them as well. So we have real world human connection with them on that issue.
Yeah,
So.
I think it's something that everybody can absolutely understand. They can feel what it means to them personally, as opposed to things where it gets very broad and harder to understand. This seems pretty basic and fundamental. I want to, Nicole, jump in with you. You were talking earlier when we met about something that I thought was really important for people to hear. You said you never want to count anybody out. You can you elaborate on getting people into the mix and share with them a little bit of what you shared with us? I thought it was fantastic.
Absolutely. So at the National Association of Broadcasters, we represent radio and TV, anything you can get free over the air with an antenna. And in my role there, we travel a lot to our state associations, and we have rooms like this where we're addressing people and talking to the people on the ground. And before this job, I worked for the National Football League. Everyone loves football. No one's willing to put their necks on the line for the NFL, right? They are for broadcasters, and it's because of the people who live there in their communities and their constituents who go to them and they tell them about the importance of issues and how it's impacting them in the real world. Again, we can go, and we've all worked for Congress, we can go and we can tell them those things, but hearing it from the people who are actually impacted on a day-to-day basis makes such a huge difference.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Tom, I always think about the RAA, sometimes labor management partnerships can be dicey, but we do so much work with you, both domestically and internationally. I want to have you talk a little bit about how do you decide when to partner, who to partner with, what are the issues that you think take on and make good partnerships? Are there things also that might make you shy away from not wanting to be involved in a coalition or initiative or an advocacy? I think it's really important for this room to walk away with some of the things that you bring to that table.
Well, I always instinctively want to work with labor, but that's just a personal thing.
Woohoo! Union strong.
And that's going back to my summers in college organizing for my teachers union. The way that I would think about it I'll take it sort of that in two parts. The first part being that the partnership between management and labor here makes sense in the same way the partnership between record labels and broadcasters makes sense. I think there's an understanding that this technology is going to change the way that consumers interact with content. It's going to change the way that they interact with the groups that all of us represent, and we are all pro-innovation in this space. There is not a dynamic here where we have the Microsofts of the world creating a technology that all of us want to not get adopted by people, right? That's not the dynamic. It's not a sort of content versus tech dynamic that sometimes gets oversimplified in sort of trade press. We all have something to benefit from here, but we all also commonly understand that if we don't put a couple of guardrails up, we all fall together in the same way that we could rise together if we get this right. So I think that there's an early understanding of sort of a collective action issue, and we're being, I think, smarter about it than at previous points in our history. As far as things that would make someone wary to join a coalition, I think thinking the opposite of that. People who are forming a coalition to purposefully exclude others or to attack people in an ad hominem way, that it's just not productive, right? We have to understand that there are going to be times when what is in the interest of one stakeholder is not in the interest of another, but there has to be constructive engagement. It cannot be that if a member of Congress doesn't co-sponsor the bill that I wanted them to, that we're going to attack them or put up a billboard saying that they hate workers. It's not. There's a time and place for going to the mattresses, and it's rare in my experience anyway.
Yes.
Great. Jenny, can you talk a little bit about Microsoft's partnerships with labor and why that's a focus now of the company?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want to say I completely agree with all of that. You never know who's going to be your friend one day, and you don't want to burn that bridge. So just wanted to just completely just say I echo everything that was just said. And I think the Microsoft's labor policy is a perfect example of that. You might not always think that tech and labor are going to be perfect bedfellows, but I think our partnership is an example of there can be common interests where you may not expect them to be. And when that happens and that aligns, you want to take advantage of it. A little over a year ago, there was a first of its kind labor and tech partnership between Microsoft and AFL-CIO. And it's been a really great partnership. It's centered around 3 different ideas around worker voice, incorporating workers into policy on AI, and then also in education. And there have been real achievements from it. There has been a skilling fair in Congress where members of a roundtable, including worker groups and also tech groups, have come together to talk to members of congressional staff and about different policies and how to incorporate worker voice into it. There's a new curriculum that is being set up where on AI with AFT about AI, and it's going to be distributed among different local AFT groups. And then there was a summit in Microsoft in the fall, which included Microsoft executives and all different members of labor unions to incorporate worker voice into how we develop our AI products. And that's been really critical, and I think there's going to be more, to come from that. But this is just, something to sort of demonstrate that we want to make sure that our technology and AI is going to incorporate workers, that there's going to be education and skilling around it, and that it doesn't have to be one side versus another. It can be working together so that we can all be successful, and that this sort of thing where we're talking about innovation, that you can be addressing and putting these guardrails in policy, but also doing other things outside the policy space to be working together as well.
So, Carrie, I feel like you could really give this group some really good tips about how you identify a target. When is it best suited? Because we've got people from all kinds of different organizations. We've got people that are national presidents in the room. We've got people that run a state fed. We've got people from organizers from different unions. We've got people coming at this from all these different ways. Can you share for the room how you target where you should be taking your legislation? Where do you start? For example, what's the determining factor when it's state or federal? Because there may be people in the audience. We do have some other policy wonks here, but we have some people that are just really getting their unions into that deeper dive. So if you can help us with that, and how do you do your priorities?
Sure. Well, rule number one, I always say, is relationships are the most important thing, and it's not just when you have an ask. Building relationships with certain legislators at the state and federal level has been probably the biggest part of my job, and I think it's important to go to them, and I know we've talked about this before. You go into them when you don't have an ask. You go into them and say, how can we help you? And you build upon that. And in terms of state and federal, I have the luxury of being in California it gets a lot of these things done, and our essentially our no fakes bill has now been implemented in California. So we do tend to start, I think, at the state level, and Congress moves at a slower pace, than the states. We've been able to implement this law in New York and Tennessee. So we on the AI policy side, we have definitely seen a lot of success in the states, which we're hoping to build upon and move to the federal level. But again, we have those existing relationships with legislators. You want to look at what committees they serve on, who they're close to, who their constituency is, and all of those considerations as well.
Great. Jenny, can you give recommendations for how you advance your agenda, especially in a changing political environment?
Yeah, I think that no matter what the sort of environment is, when there's a change of administration on the federal side, or when, even on the state side, when, you have a new legislature or governor or anything, I don't think you change your policy goals. You might change how you message them. But I think that's part of the reason why you also want to have a broad coalition. Because if you have a very narrow coalition, it's not going to help you when there's a new government in place. A broad coalition is going to serve you well no matter who is in charge. Also, you may want to find some additional champions, right? Who's going to champion you may be different. Who's going to sort of be your messenger, I guess, may be different depending on who's sort of in charge, or who's your governor, or who's your president, or who's leading the House, or your state legislative bodies. But I don't think your ultimate policy goals need to ever change, and they shouldn't change, because those are the things that are sort of your guiding principles.
Thank you. So, Tom, I need you to do for this room just a deeper dive on how the states are handling the AI issues, and you've done so much work. RIA has done so much work in that space. Can you walk us through that? And thank you for that last-minute support lever to the governor of New York when the bill got signed. There you go.
Well, I think that we're seeing the battle shift into the states because, as Carrie mentioned, the Congress is moving slower, as they do. But this issue is already quickly becoming something that everyone's interacted with. I mean, I'm sorry if this is sort of like a thing that everyone's already been asked to, but like show of hands if you've already used a generative AI program for something in your work life. Okay. And I'm assuming it's more if it was just like as a goof, like, hey, I cloned my voice to see if I could dupe my wife. I could. She didn't think it's so funny as I did.
Oh, no, Tom.
But the interesting thing about if we're going to go into specifically the voice and likeness issue, is that we're addressing something that doesn't traditionally fit comfortably into any of the established intellectual property buckets, right? It doesn't fit neatly into copyright or trademark or patent. And the best fit for purpose is state right of publicity law, which already is different in all 50 states, right? Because all 50 states had a different industry and a different group of constituents they were trying to protect. It grew up differently in California than it did in Tennessee, than it did in Texas or even Iowa. So what we've been doing throughout with our coalition partners is approaching states to see where can we make the sort of positive movement that we think is ultimately going to support the goal of a federal solution, right? Can we get states moving in a direction where there's buy-in at the federal level, right? Can we add voice to those protections? There are certain folks who are trying to see, can we add, different elements of what a person does with their voice, different elements of what they do with their face. And we're finding that it's not always an easy fit. Sometimes it's a square peg into a round hole because, again, it's not the sort of interests that are normally what right of publicity law was meant to address, which was usually a very narrow commercial harm. How does something that was created really to protect against a famous person's fame essentially being ripped off to sell another product, how can we use that body of law to address the dignitary harm that is posed by deepfakes? Right? We can't just always say that, that we're only worried about the commercial aspect of this, because this not only does it go after people's livelihoods, but it really changes their lives if you've been the victim of a deepfake. And it's hard to come back from that, even if people know that it's fake. So, I mean, that's just, there's a lot of, we could talk probably for the rest of the afternoon about, where we've run into these difficulties, but I think it's incredibly productive for our coalition to be doing this from state to state and having these conversations, because not only does it familiarize state lawmakers and maybe more junior federal lawmakers with the needs of their constituents and showing that this is a political winner, but it also trains us on what's going to be a winning strategy when it comes to the federal side. So I think that there's no wasted time on this effort. We all get better the more that we do.
That's 100% true. Whether it's contract negotiations, legislation, that iterative process has enhanced, it does get better every time. So that's great. Nicole, I've got a big question for you, the $1 million question here. Given your just extensive experience, how do you build relationships with the legislative staff? Can you really talk to this room about how they might approach it, knowing that we have people from so many different elements of their unions in the room?
Absolutely. So Carrie hit on a huge piece of this, which is to form those relationships before you have an ask. For us, that people give the word lobbyist has a dirty name, but our jobs are to be educators, right? To go in and tell them about the issues that are impacting the people that we represent. Those people are you all, right? And so whether it's taking advantage of the district work periods when they are back in their district offices and their state offices, to go in and just say, hi, here's who I am. Here's the industry that, that I work in. Here's some things that were, issues that Congress may face that really impact us. But I think also, those people change over constantly, especially in the House, right? I used to tell my parents when I worked in Congress that congressional careers are like a dog's, it's like dog years, right? If you're on the Hill for a year, it's 7 years in the real world. And so really just making sure, but again, I can't drive this home enough. Members of Congress care first and foremost about the people who elect them, because without those people, they don't have jobs. So go to the people who represent you. You are their constituents. Tell them why this matters to you in the real world, and why they should care about it. I think, I know somebody up here mentioned too, never to count out the people who might not be with you on one issue, because we cover a lot of issues in our jobs, and a lot of issues impact you all. There might be somebody who's completely opposed to you on one thing, who on the next thing is your champion. And so again, just building those relationships, going in and making sure that they understand how these issues that they're working on really impact you, and using those opportunities to educate them about that.
You touched a little bit on the constituent relationship and how important that is. Carrie and I talk about that all the time, and I want to toss it to Carrie. When you're prepping somebody to go into a legislative office, what is it that you do? So, like, let's say you're sending somebody in from Nebraska to meet with on something that they don't believe they really have an art scene. What do you do to help the person, the principal you're bringing in, prepare for somebody that, as a legislator, might not understand those issues as much? What do you do?
Sure. Well, the first thing is what we like to do is I like to know how many of our members. I mean, if I'm working for SAG-AFTRA, I want to know how many of our members are in their district. So we've done all of those counts for every congressional district and every state, because that's what we will tell the senators. And I think it's important to know who they represent. So if it's a local theater company, for example, we can reach out across to Equity, partner with them. They have some form, for our industry anyway, they have some form of entertainment in their district, finding out what that is and how to hit on that and who they're representing. As Nicole said, that's what they care about, the people that elect them. So we need to focus on that and why that's important to them. I'll just give one quick example of during COVID. We really had to create a huge coalition to help our members get through that. And I went to now Senator Schiff and I said, you have 30,000 people of ours in your district, and we need help on this mixed earner issue that we identified. It was a kind of a loophole in unemployment where we have members who earn W-2 income and 1099 income, and they were getting sandwiched by UI. And anyway, we were able to solve it, and he stepped up to the plate because he knew there were so many of our members in his district that were hurting and that needed that help. So that's just an example of how we identified who our leader would be and why. And RIAA was with us on that. That was a huge effort to get that done, and it helped a lot of our joint members. So
Yeah.
I could add to that.
Go ahead.
Actually, just first of all saying that that effort is the single thing I'm most proud of doing in my entire public policy career. So thank you for bringing us all together on that. One additional just sort of example of, what sort of building on what Carrie's saying about showing that information and how you connect to the constituents. This is something that NAB is really good at, right? The mobilization of state by state and district by district radio stations, like that, it's always just a masterclass in how to get a message across very quickly. One thing that from the music community I can say has always really impressed me, and it's our team at RIAA along with several other the music industry folks, is a website called 50statesofmusic.com. Check it out. It's really, really cool because we're not just relying on members of Congress and their staff being music lovers. We all love music. We may not necessarily go out of our way or change what we're doing in our careers based on what an artist that we love says, but it gives exact information, or the exact as we can, showing all the people who are both in front of and behind the mic, in front of and behind the camera, who actually do this work, who work in the industry, our GDP impact, the number of workers that we represent. That is just invaluable when we do, as I'm sure we're all about to do for the new Congress, our 101 meetings are, hi, welcome to Congress, here's why you should care about my thing as well. Like, that's always something that we have to bring in. And if you can find a way to quantify the impact that you have in a legislator's district, that's always going to go so far to opening the door and keeping it open.
I think that's really helpful. Did anybody else want to add in on that one? You guys got it covered? Maybe? No, they're going to pass. I will say, Carrie, one of my first memories of you and I in a particular D.C. office was we were walking into somebody from Nebraska, and they really did believe they did not have an arts community, but because Carrie and I had talked about it in advance, I was on the phone with my uncle from western Nebraska and went over every arts industry in the area, and when I started saying, well, that's right down the street from the church that you go to, suddenly this person went from I oppose to I will be neutral, I will be quiet, I'm good. And that's because of the kind of prep work that people do. So when you're in the room and thinking about what you might bring to this, do not ever take out the preparation piece because, some unions are very lucky. They're very big. They have a lot of resources and a big operation, but you might be a small local union working with that and you're bringing something in. Always doing that preparation makes such a big deal. And that, I think, is a pretty good place to leave it, is build the coalition, talk to your friends, talk to the people that you don't know, and talk to the people that you don't think are your natural allies, because they might in fact be your allies on some things. And that is what a coalition truly is people that you've brought together for common cause, which is obviously also the union movement. So we are union strong here. We're going to give a big round of applause to our fabulous panel. Tom, Carrie, Nicole, Jenny, thank you very much. Give them a round of applause for such a great, great job. And thank you all for being here today. Thank you.